Criticism is necessary to development. There's not really any other way to put it. Now, I know that there are parts of any art form that are subjective, but the kind of necessary criticism that I just mentioned is definitely not intended to stifle creativity or anything. The kind of criticism I'm referring to is the feedback that we get, generally from our teachers and our peers while we're in school maybe, but also sometimes from our audience, which I'll get to in a bit. It's generally constructive in nature, with the end goal of helping us on our journey to become better players and musicians. I think that the terms criticism and feedback can be one and the same sometimes, but not always, as I generally find feedback to be more positive in nature than criticism, but you might hear me use those terms interchangeably during parts of this video. So let's talk about criticism, why it's helpful, and 3 kinds of criticism that might be, well, problematic. Now, anyone who watched my end of 2020 celebration video titled "We Did It" might remember that I mentioned a choice encounter with one of my viewers, and a number of you expressed interest in what actually happened here. I will go into this, because I feel it falls into one of the 3 categories of potentially problematic criticism that I'm going to address in this video. We interrupt this video for a very important announcement. This is Ike. Ike is one of my cats. Ike wants you to like this video and subscribe, or he may never make an appearance on any future videos. The choice is yours. That is all. Also, I started a Patreon, and I received my very first pledge from a patron this week. So very warm thanks to Mark for supporting my work on these videos. Really means a lot to me. Anyway, on to the video, roll intro. So first, how is criticism helpful? Well, for me at least, the biggest way it's helpful is that we can learn from the collective experience of others. Especially while you're in school, sharing good, constructive criticism with your peers in, say, an open format masterclass, for example, is a really great way to learn from other people working on many of the same things as you are. This is also why private lessons are a thing. Someone more experienced than you ideally offers information, encouragement, and constructive criticism in order to maximize your potential. Whether the feedback comes from your peers or your teachers, learning from, asking questions, and accepting feedback from someone more experienced than you is something that should be welcomed with open arms. To be honest, I wish I had gotten better at this much sooner than I did, especially when I was in school. Don't be like me and wait until your late 20s. Criticism can take many different forms as well. For example, some people are extremely direct with their feedback, saying something like, "That just doesn't sound good."
The first time I did it, the second time I was thinking of the third.
Well, you know something? It sounded better the first time.
That's about as direct as it can get. But follow that up with effective suggestions on how things can be improved. You've got a nice, helpful bit of feedback there. Other times, it might be veiled in some kind of profound allegory about the ocean's tides and the moon's reflection on the water, with regards to how you start the first note of your sonata. Still, if it results in an improvement of understanding, this was good feedback. Or you just need to practice. But I'm not actually here to talk about good kinds of criticism or feedback today. I wanted to talk more about the kinds of criticism that are either unhelpful to the end user or even so far as detrimental to them. As perpetual students, whether we're in school or not, we all respond to different kinds of criticism. Some students might respond really well to direct or even borderline rude feedback, while others might crumble under something like that. Especially if you're considering a private teacher or studying with one at university, I think it's really important to think about this stuff. For example, when I was in my undergrad, the direct, borderline, rude feedback kind of teacher probably would have crushed me. But nowadays, I might actually prefer it. Anyway, I've identified 3 categories of what I've defined as potentially problematic criticism, so let's jump in and go through these. This is far from an exhaustive list, but more so focuses on the types of feedback I've experienced in my lifetime. This is the kind of criticism, or more like feedback maybe in this case, that focuses only on positive things about your playing. Don't get me wrong, This is great for encouraging students on the things that they're doing really well, and should not be overlooked, I don't think, but it can be detrimental if used exclusively. Not exposing a player to the things that they might need improvement on may leave them with an inflated perception of their place in the overall spectrum of players, so that down the line when it comes time to actually compete for things like jobs, they may end up a little bit unprepared. As for me, with my students, I like to encourage my students for sure, but also provide them with a realistic context for the bigger picture. As an example, I came up as sort of a bigger fish in a smaller pond, if you will. I mean, I definitely worked hard at improving and practicing, but I feel like I was able to skate by with some significant deficiencies in my development because I wasn't ever fully and directly called out on it by many of my teachers. So when I left my hometown to go to Indiana University and get my master's degree, I was suddenly made very aware of the extremely high level of playing and musicianship that the world has to offer, and I had to make some major adjustments to keep up and match that level. I've also seen musicians sort of stall out in their development because nobody was providing them with direct and honest feedback. I think good, effective criticism encourages the positive aspects while still providing context and suggestions for improvement. A great approach to this is the compliment sandwich. Lead with a positive, follow with suggestions for improvement, and finish with another positive. This leaves the feedback recipient with a positive outcome as well as strategies to get better. This is the kind of criticism that chooses to focus exclusively or overwhelmingly on the bad or negative aspects of our playing. Focusing on what needs improvement isn't really what's potentially problematic here. It's the complete absence of encouragement that may be overwhelming for some individuals or students. As I said before, everybody responds differently to different kinds of criticism, and if you're the kind of person that doesn't handle abrasive feedback well, or maybe you're at an earlier place in your development, this likely isn't the kind of feedback for you. This is why I have the very important word potentially in front of problematic criticism in the title of this video. This kind of feedback is not necessarily problematic for everyone, but potentially catastrophic for some. I know some musicians who have completely shut down and even quit playing their instrument because of a teacher who just destroyed them on a weekly basis. Again, if you're looking for a private teacher to work with and you know that they have this kind of teaching style, just be sure to consider whether or not this would be a good thing or potentially problematic for you. This is the kind of criticism that comes from an individual who, knowingly or unknowingly, thinks so incredibly high of themselves that they simply must be God's gift to their craft, which means that they are not only always right, but everyone else is always wrong, no matter what. This is the focus of my brief viewer altercation I mentioned earlier, so let's observe a case study. These comments came in on my video, 3 Strategies for Mozart 40. I should preface this by saying that my original target audience for this video was high school students who were preparing this excerpt for their all-state ensemble audition. And for anyone who is outside of the US, all-state groups are a competitive audition group for high school students in each state, and the bar for acceptance is generally quite high. I mainly just wanted to make a video that could get someone from 0 to well on their way, with some effective practice strategies to learn and improve their presentation. In an effort to avoid anyone playing the excerpt too heavily, or even on the string, for example, I explained that the excerpt should be a little aggressive, but not overly so, because Mozart is, quote, like the peak of elegance. You don't want it to sound overworked or overplayed in any way. I feel like it should sound nice and present, and maybe even a touch aggressive, but without being ugly or rough in any way. This is Mozart after all, and we want it to sound like the peak of elegance. Sure, this is a blanket statement, I get that, but I think it gets the point across. A couple months after posting, I get this comment.
On the contrary, not all of Mozart's music should sound elegant, especially in the fast passages. That's why before playing a piece like this in Europe, we learn why the piece was written, under what circumstances, and what the composer was going through. This is not Eine kleine Nacht music. This is one of the 2 minor symphonies composed by Mozart during a time of Great Depression for him, financially and emotionally. He also composed it in the Sturm und Drang period. Really hope you know what this means. And with all this data, these fast passages should be played very fast, and the spiccato should come from a staccato bounce that depicts the stress of a storm. Before lecturing, educate yourself, culturally speaking, not just copying what a particular conductor would or wouldn't do and expose it like a standard. This is very unprofessional. I'd recommend that you go to Europe and get some culture under the hood.
First of all, wow. Second of all, okay, buddy. I replied, trying to be both polite and a little bit cheeky. Thank you for your comment. I do stand by how I described it. I believe I even mentioned that it should carry aggression. You are not wrong in some of your descriptions, but I disagree that this passage must only be fast and extremely aggressive. Thank you for your very polite and professional comment. I look forward to hearing your Mozart 40 video.
It's irrelevant what you believe it should or shouldn't sound like. This fast passage has anger, impotence, desperation, and a mental storm of thought and action. Not your average Mozartian stroke and articulation. Hence, this stress is best woven into the complex speed for the effect it has to bring to the table. This is the exhilaration and resolution in the aftermath of the motive. Again, not your average American conductor point of view, but very real and true to its roots. Therefore, explaining this passage without the essential historic elements of this piece is sacrilege. I do eagerly recommend that you apply the former as the ground basis before any technical exposé.
Okay, they're not 100% wrong here. Historic context can be and is important in understanding the big picture. However, this was still not the goal of the video, and if I wanted to do a full dive into historical context, I wouldn't have made a 10-minute YouTube video. Now, a friend of mine pointed this out to me, so I wanted to go look into it a little bit. Let me see. Yeah, Mozart's 25th Symphony is decidedly in the Sturm und Drang period of the late 1760s to early 1780s, being written in 1773. But Mozart 40 was written after this period had sort of fallen off in 1788. Apparently, even Robert Schumann is noted as saying that 40 possesses, quote, lightness and grace. Again, I probably would have just accepted the feedback from this viewer and moved on, but their tone was just so unbelievably condescending. Also, if there are any music historians that are watching this video and think that I'm completely off the mark on this, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know. I don't claim to be an expert on historical contexts of Mozart, so yeah, let me know. Anyway, so after this comment, another viewer joined the fray.
I think you're missing the point. Bobby's argument seems to be that this passage should be played aggressively, albeit still within the spectrum of what is stylistically acceptable for Mozart. I agree. Amp up the aggression too hard, even for the sake of, to quote you, anger, impotence, desperation, a mental storm of thought and action, and the performer is just left with a stressed and ugly sound. There's a balance between achieving an appropriately aggressive sound and just pushing it too far past the boundaries into the realm of an ugly, grating tone. That being said, I think you could have argued your point in a way that was a bit less insulting to Bobby. His interpretation seems to come from a place of education and careful study, and to negate that with your caustic comments about being very unprofessional and sacrilegious seems to be, ironically, quite unprofessional in kind.
And then, the floodgates opened.
Wrong again. Comparing this fast passage to any other of Mozart's stylistic passages is utterly unacceptable, because they're totally different. It is sacrilegious to explain a passage without the composer's intent, at the time being storm and stress. It's about this particular passage that he's talking about, and no, this is not the way to play it. No, I'm not missing the point. Playing this passage in the way he explained it shows the lack of cultural knowledge, experience, history, and that way of playing, which you agree upon sounds placid and extremely lame. You people get insulted very easily. Yes, truth might be insulting, nonetheless, a difference of opinion. What he's emulating is a scholastic director's approach with not enough background. Therefore, I do recommend to you both to go to the source before speaking about your way of playing this passage and not the proper way. If this hurts, it's just because of your lack of musical culture.
Man, I can just hear the furious keyboard warrior in this comment. Anyway, at this point, I was beyond done listening, but I did make one final comment. Who even are you, man? And what qualification gives you the right to be God's gift to Mozart? It was at this point that I used a tool called Hide User from this channel. This does not alert the user that they've been banned or anything. All it does is make it so nobody else can see their posts or interact with their comments. So they can furiously type away and comment on every single one of my videos, but never actually be heard. Cool. To this viewer, if you happen to watch this video, I was not insulted or offended by your comments. I just refuse to be talked down to in such a way when I'm only trying to get across very quick, effective details about how to quickly play a Mozart excerpt in a 10-minute internet video. I'm sorry you didn't like the video, and I'm consistently working to improve my videos over time each time I release something. So thank you for the feedback, but no thank you to your attitude. To everyone else, if you encounter somebody like this out in the wild, I found that the best thing to do is try to see through their BS and try to at least find something helpful in their comments. The rest of the self-important, narcissistic language, I definitely feel is something that can simply be ignored if at all possible. Some people may not even be aware that they're being condescending, so if this person is a friend of yours and you know them well, maybe you can sit them down for a chat and just tell them how you feel. Or just, hide the user from your channel so you don't have to hear from them anymore. Whatever works. Anyway, this is a complex topic and this video is getting a little bit long at this point. So what do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts on these kinds of criticism? Do you think I'm an uncultured heathen who needs to go study in Europe to get some culture under my belt? Alternatively, what is your preferred style of teaching to learn from? Let me know down in the comments. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you found it helpful to discuss these kinds of criticisms, and I hope you at least enjoyed my viewer altercation that I promised in a previous video. I want to give another warm shout out and thank you to Mark for becoming my first Patreon patron. You can check that out at the link in the description if you feel like supporting the channel in a different way. Another free way that you can support the channel is to like this video and subscribe for more base content. I hope you're having a fantastic day today, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next video. Catch you later. Bye.